You're watching The Compassionate Dad with Brian King.
Hello, everybody. Brian King here, and welcome to another episode of The Compassionate Dad, where we are working together to create a more compassionate world, one child at a time. And this morning, I brought somebody really, really special on board to have a conversation about that very thing. His name is Jason MacKenzie, and he has a website, a mission, and a podcast called Mental Health Warriors. And just let me read a little bit off the website here. It said, Mental Health Warriors is the premier resource for men looking to take action, to heal, develop themselves emotionally, spiritually, socially, and mentally. That's a huge mission. Mm-hmm. And the first question I have for you, Jason, is what compelled you to take this on?
Well, that's a great question to kick off. But yeah, thanks for having me on the show, first of all. And I think what compelled me to take it on was my own backstory related to, watching my wife really deal with some really just horrific mental health issues, but also wanted to take action in the sense that I was talking a lot about mental health and changing stigma and leadership that fosters a culture, an open culture around mental health and all that kind of stuff. And I was really starting to feel like it was very transactional, right? So I would go in, I would talk to somebody, I'd have these nice conversations with them after, and then I would leave and I would think, God, I wonder what actually changed as a result of that. And I started to tell myself that I was getting sick of talking about it. So reliving the past and all this kind of stuff. And I wasn't really 100% sure how much of an enduring impact it was having. And then I realized just earlier this year that it wasn't that I was getting sick of talking about it so much. It was that I was getting sick of only talking about it. So I decided to, and you and I are in some of the same communities online. We both understand the power of community and having a tribe, band of brothers, whatever you want to call it. And so I decided to create that around the issue of mental health. And for me, what I've realized is mental health is almost like a vehicle. For me, what I'm the most passionate is something that's even more fundamental, and it's human connection, right? So mental health is something that I'm passionate about as well. And it gives me a vehicle or medium to help people create more human connection with one another. So that's why I'm doing it.
That's beautiful. And it's wonderful when you can bring it down to something so specific. That now
it took me a long time.
Yeah, and that's part of the process too. As you get deeper into it and you get all the noise out of your own mind and get clear on what your mission really is, then what's at the very heart of it eventually reveals itself. One of the reasons why I really got more into connection is because I grew up with undiagnosed learning disabilities, one of which is somewhere on the autism spectrum. And I was always on the outside looking in. Mm-hmm. I was always aching and paining because I couldn't connect with people. And when I finally discovered that that was the issue and poured myself into learning how that's done, now to me, it's like oxygen. I can't connect enough. And to be able to then turn that around and create a larger movement around it like you're doing and show more people the way, that just makes everybody's life better.
Yeah, it does. And, it's funny. Some of this stuff is just becoming obvious to me now. But like, for example, I always had this. You've felt a lack of human connection. And I think that what many people feel is they feel a lack of connection with themselves because for me, I was really trying very hard to conform to the stereotype that I thought I was supposed to conform to, alpha male, blah, blah, confrontational, decisive, bold, action-oriented, emotions were weakness, all that kind of stuff. Nobody ever told me that's how I was supposed to be. I just kind of absorbed it through whatever, for a million different reasons I absorbed it. And that was never me. And it's, so what happened was because I wasn't allowing myself to discover who I really was, I always had this gnawing feeling of like, I don't know, loneliness isn't the right word, but just the fact that the idea that there maybe could be something more, or sometimes things seem more difficult than they needed to be. And what I've learned though, is when you don't allow yourself to, connect with yourself, it's not authentically with yourself or let yourself truly understand and learn who you really are, you cannot connect authentically with other people. You can't. So that journey for me has been really powerful. And that's what I want to help guys in the mental health warriors community see. Is that, hey man, this is a safe place where you can actually be yourself. And if you don't even need to know who that is, you can just start sharing. And that's, and like you said, that starts that process of discovery, right? So yeah, it's really fun. It's just beautiful to watch guys just kind of sometimes tiptoed down that path, or sometimes they run, full speed headlong into it. And everybody's different, and there's no right or wrong way. And it's just a wonderful thing to be a part of.
Well, one thing that I've really benefited from in listening to your podcast is you very confidently and yet gently lead your guests down that path to being more vulnerable about their story. And there are some of the more alpha males that are scared to death of that idea. They think they're letting their guard down, they're being weak, that they're not being manly enough, when the reality is, and you know this as well as anyone, there is so much strength to be found from being at your most vulnerable, but still being able to withstand the storm. And there's so few people that ever give themselves the opportunity to discover that.
I could not agree more. I mean, that's why it's funny. That's why I wrote the book I wrote. And, the subtitle of the book is How Cultivating Vulnerability Makes You a Stronger, Wiser, and More Courageous Father. And it's true because
Amen.
Yeah, strength is, vulnerability allows you to connect more deeply with the people around you. And so the premise of increased strength is we're stronger together. Nobody's stronger by themselves. When you have a band of brothers or a tribe of people around you who care about you and know what you're trying to do and are there to support you, you're stronger. You're more courageous because when you're vulnerable, like I define vulnerability as having the courage to look yourself in the mirror and be honest and without judgment about who you see staring back at you, right? So fundamentally, it means accepting yourself as you are right now. It doesn't mean you have to stay where you are, but it means that here's where I'm at. And this is, I just want to be objective and accept myself for where I'm at. And that gives me a place from which I can, move somewhere else tomorrow. So it gives you courage though, because if I unconditionally accept myself as I am, a perfectly imperfect human being, nobody can hurt me, man. Like, because I know that this is me, I accept myself, and that's the way it is. So when you love yourself, it's almost like a shield of some sort that, if somebody comes up and says something to me, it doesn't affect my perspective on myself. I use it as information. It allows me to process that information. Then I move on. And it makes you wiser for that exact reason, actually, is because I can much more openly receive feedback without it looking at it like an indictment of me as a human being. It's accepting that I'm flawed and I'm learning, and I always will continue to be, and being open to receiving feedback and learning from people and putting myself out there. That's what makes you wiser. So vulnerability is the foundational piece for increasing your strength, courage, and wisdom, in my view.
Something that you mentioned at the beginning of that reminds me of the beautiful tagline you have on your website. We have struggled too, we will not judge you. And you talked about looking at yourself vulnerably without judgment. That is so key, and it's the one ingredient people seem to miss, because they think, well, if you have to be honest with yourself, you have to look at all the stuff that you don't like. Well, in my experience, it's not that you're looking at the stuff you don't like, you're looking at the stuff you've been lying to yourself about. Believing that it has to be perfect, believing that if you're less than perfect, you're inferior, insignificant. But when you realize that we all have, for whatever reason, bought into this myth that how we present ourselves is superior to who we really are. And we're all out there being somebody and putting on this big act, when the reality is we all want to be seen and valued for who we are. And the more of us that can allow that in ourselves and live it and model it, the more vulnerability becomes a safe place to go and the preferred place to go. And the only way we're going to find that way to connection, or really the best way to find our way to that connection, is to be able to see those little places in each other where we can step in, where we can offer ourselves and say, can I help you? Can I be here for you? I noticed you're feeling a little vulnerable right now. I happen to be skilled in this area. Would you like some assistance? And vice versa, as opposed to pretending everything is cool. You don't need anything from anybody. You're a self-made this or that. And you continue along your way suffering because you won't let anybody in.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I think too, like, people have this idea of vulnerability where they think it's barfing your entire story all over the face of every single person that you come in contact with. And it's not that. It's coming from a place of service. And it's not so much necessarily even the act of sharing my story. It's the willingness to share my story in the service of others, right? So if I see somebody who I sense that they might be struggling, for example, with whatever the thing is, it gives me an opportunity to talk to them and say, so this is when I give talks to people, I always end it by saying, and I end every single podcast by saying, look, man, if you're struggling, I have struggled too. And if you ever want to talk, I will not judge you, right? Because I think every person, like, I think a lot of times we wonder, what are some of the things we can do to, like, if you look at organizations, for example, especially like police organizations, but it's really a lot of organizations, and they really want to have these gigantic initiatives to like reduce stigma, like, oh, we got to form a committee and we got to get some funding and create a policy and some new processes and get like a, focus group. Come on, man. Like, seriously, just every time.
Let's take the human moment and make it bureaucratic.
Right. So every time I talk, I challenge people to stand up and say that exact thing. If you're struggling, I have struggled too. And if you want to talk, I will not judge you. Because if everybody just did that, like, there'd be no stigma, right? So it can go away right away. But to get back to your point, I think that accepting ourselves as we are doesn't mean it actually frees us from all the self-judgment, because like when I stopped drinking, for example, I had so much judgment about that. I could not. It's such a weird thing to think about because I couldn't really, I don't know that I could have grabbed onto the judgment in a way. It was just this constant stream of mental diarrhea that was going through my head and then it would conflict with all these rationalizations, and it was just a mess. Right. But when I finally just allowed myself to kind of hit rock bottom or whatever you want to call it. And I had this moment where I could just see things with complete clarity, and it meant just saying, like, I'm 41 years old. Actually, you know what? Today is the 3-year anniversary of being alcohol free.
Happy anniversary, man.
Hey, man, what a fun way to celebrate. But it was just me saying, like, I'm 41. I drink every day. I caused my wife, this amazing woman, like, so much worry and concern. And now my kids are noticing and they're telling me that they're disappointed in me. So just being able to say that and then to follow that with, I want something different. I want something different. Instead, as simple as that sounds, I was never able to say it because I was so busy holding on to the past with this death grip and the things that I was doing and being too afraid to do something else and thinking if I admitted how much I was struggling, then that would be like this indictment about me as a human being and people would see all through the persona and blah, blah, blah. Just this friggin' mess of like, just caught up in this like spider web that I couldn't get out of. But all it really took was me just saying some really simple things to myself. And that was only the beginning of that phase of my journey, but it gave me a place from which to depart on another leg of my journey, I guess.
Yeah. Living a sober life, and it doesn't mean just avoiding intoxication, but things that cloud your mind, things that make it very difficult to see yourself clearly, let alone anything else. And that allows you for those little moments of insight that give you the answers you're looking for, as opposed to trying to run from that place of vulnerability. And you mentioned the alpha male movement. I'm seeing some of those groups on Facebook as well. And we have very different approaches to masculinity. There's room for everyone. But again, I tend to see this fear of anything perceived as it's got to be all muscles all the time. It's got to be pushing yourself physically to the nth degree. It's got to be dressing the part. It's very stereotypical. Mm-hmm. And my question always arises is why that? Why is this the preferred means of being a male or preferred way of being a female? Whatever happened to just being human in whatever way that shows up?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's this thing that going around the internet. It's like 18, the ideal, no, I don't know how factual this is, but I mean, it's the 18 ideal body images in different countries around the world. So for men and for women, it's crazy how different they are, right? So our belief about what masculinity is really shaped by our culture here. It's actually even different between Canada and the United States, actually, according to this little, whatever you call it, meme or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. It's a great question. Like, so I look at myself and I am still the alpha male. I'm still that. Oh, for sure. I'm still that, but I go about it in a much more different way. Like, so embracing vulnerability didn't make me any less driven, or it didn't make me, any less of a leader. It made me more of a leader. But, so to be so if I look at myself, like professionally, for example, before I left the corporate world, I was more of an alpha male than I probably was before, but it was different because I didn't achieve that status through like bullying and intimidation. I achieved that status through, human connection and rallying people around a shared vision and caring about people personally, but being able to challenge them directly and allowing them to challenge me directly and all this kind of stuff. So it's not that being an alpha male is good or bad. It just means that our perception of what it takes to get there to that status is good or bad. And it's not that I don't know. It's not this even something that I strive for, but I'm just a really driven person. And I can be quite insistent, I guess, when there are certain things that I want to get done. But having said that, going back to your question about like the physical aspect of it, I think that's a really interesting point because one of the reasons people always laugh at me because I post these shirtless selfies on Instagram, right? To go to your point. But one of the reasons I do that, it has nothing to do at all with like arrogance or anything like that. It's actually to make the point you're talking about to a certain extent is I want guys to see that vulnerability and being in touch with our emotions and being sensitive and caring and wanting to be of service to other people and all that doesn't have to, that's not mutually exclusive with being like, you can be that way and you can be physically strong and you can be fit. Like, and if that's what you want, that's cool. You can create that. If that's not what you want, that's cool too. It doesn't really matter. It's totally your choice. But all of these beautiful things, they don't have to be at the expense of one another. You can form them all into your own nice version of yourself, whatever that looks like for you. You know what I mean?
Excellently put. Being much more comprehensive in who you allow yourself to be, as opposed to thinking I have to fit this mold versus another. And one thing I got into this discussion last night with a group of my clients is, what I guess I was referring to earlier on was this sense that masculinity equals aggression in some way. Right. This in-your-face competitiveness. And I think a little bit of what you're referring to is when you're in the corporate realm is you can show up with a great deal of conviction. I'm very driven. This is my vision. This is what I stand for. And I want to compel you or recruit you in this vision so we can accomplish it together. But you don't have to be in somebody's face to stand your ground that way. You just be strong in your presence. And that can be very masculine.
Yeah. And, the other thing too, you're totally right. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day, actually, and he was saying, because he's got a very similar level of self-awareness to me. We're quite similar. That's why we're so close. And he was talking about leadership and he was talking about leading teams and the ability to rally people around a cause. And he said to me something that I challenged him on because he goes, man, people don't get it because it's just so easy. And my response to that was, it's not easy, man. It's easy because of the work you have done to get to the point where you are today. But that work wasn't easy. It took you 43 years to get there, man. Right? But what that means is that when I am confident in myself and I am confident in my message and I am open to receiving feedback and all of those things, and I put human connection as the main priority when I interact with people, I can speak with so much confidence, right? So much hubris-free confidence that people are just drawn to it, man, because everybody wants to be around people like that. I'm the same way. I like being around people like that too, right? So it's, or being the kind of person that creates an environment where people know that they will be listened to and that you will give them your full presence and that you will care about them and that you will challenge them because you want to help them improve, like all of those things. But it comes from a place inside of you where you know that I am committed to doing good in the world, whatever that looks like for me. And I'm committed to I believe that I don't know everything right now, but I'm going to continue to learn. So when you have those kind of attitudes, man, it's you can speak with such power and such conviction. It's awesome. Absolutely.
And when you really believe that you are on a life mission of growth, because when you're a human being, that's what you signed up for. You are here to grow. There is no stop sign. There's no end of the road. You keep going. Mm-hmm. And as long as you embrace that sense of discovery and wonder, and you have that beginner's mind, that openness to new ideas and new ways of seeing things, life is never boring. Anybody that says, man, I'm bored, I got nothing to do, that's a person who doesn't have enough to come to them. But when you're part of a larger mission like what you and I have created, there's always somebody to help. There's always some stone within ourselves left unturned. There's always another opportunity to just be there and listen and connect with another human being. And what better way to spend your time, man?
Oh, like, yeah, totally. And, I think too, I mean, I always tell people like the conversation we're having right now. I mean, if I had kept drinking, I wouldn't be having these conversations. And when you start having these kind of conversations, I realized anyways, just how superficial a lot of the interactions I was having were, that I didn't acknowledge them as superficial at the time, but I see that now. And when you start having conversations like this, like, I don't really want to have any other kind, right? I mean, it's such a, we talk about things that are real, and we talk about things that are important to both of us. And as you kind of throw your ideas into the marketplace of ideas, and you have two unique insights or perspectives that have never come together before, when they kind of collide and mesh together, you get these insights out of it that are like you never could have come up with on your own, or you get opportunities like to create a new business.
We lost your audio there, Jason. I don't know what happened to it. This is one of those wonderful little hiccups that is by virtue of being live. One of those life happens moments that just occurs and we go along with it. If you need to, Jason, you can go ahead and go out and come back in and see if that corrects it. Well, one thing that I want to throw out there, kind of we were talking about, I just had an ADHD moment there. Well, the point that I was going to make is, when you look at the stuff that really floods our attention these days, or the things that encourages us to give our attention to it, reality shows, The Bachelor, The Kardashians, I don't know any circumstances where any suffering on this planet was reduced by knowing who won The Bachelor. You can give your attention to that stuff, but ultimately, how does it improve the lives for anyone, let alone yourself? Jason, sorry that we lost the audio at the end here, but I got to tell you, man, it was a home run up until technology jumped up and smacked us in the back of the head. But even when those little moments happen, they're imperfect. But so what? There were so much more beautiful things, so many more pearls that came from this conversation. And Jason, I'm so grateful that you came on. I want each of you to take some time and go and check out Jason's website at mentalhealthwarriors.com. You'll also see a link there where you can listen to his podcast and even subscribe. It's an absolutely beautiful show. And if you want to follow up with me and the work I'm doing to spread compassion through parenting throughout the world, you can find me online at thecompassionatedad.com. This has been Brian King once again. Thanks again to Jason MacKenzie, our awesome guest today. We'll talk to you next time. Have a great day.